Want to know a shocking realization why type 5 is so obsessed with knowing better? Then keep watching this video. Hey, welcome back to Typevolution, where we learn how to evolve through our personality type with the help of understanding and applying personality type theory. So this topic is 5's internal landscape, and this is actually something I have recently delved into myself. I've had a personal experience that I would say is related to the 5-ish obsession and focus, and also weakness. And why I mentioned the previous video, because there's going to be a few points that are the same. And spoiler alert, it's going to be about attachment style to some extent as well. Okay, anyway, so what is type 5? As you know, type 5 in the Enneagram is overly focused on intellectualizing everything, about getting to know things, understanding things, creating their own version of reality in their minds, and kind of perfecting that. So this is why they might seem a bit one-ish sometimes in this area, but at the same time it's mostly about their own perspective and not so much about external standards, even though it might appear the same way. You probably know 5s who seem also very certain in the way how they approach particular subjects. Usually it's going to be niche subjects. Core 5s, and also to some extent wing 5s, so 6-wing 5 and 4-wing 5, are often found really delving into niche subjects really deeply and really establishing a sort of expert position, someone who knows best. And as you know, I think you can see signs of that and hints of that in the way how I also have approached typology, and what I've also displayed on my website and in my videos, in some of my videos. So this is what 5 usually does. And the thing is, so they seem very certain on the outside. So this is also what differentiates them from 6s. So 6s tend to continuously still struggle with some kind of doubts or fighting doubts, either internally or externally. 5s usually do not have that kind of doubt. And that really makes a difference here. So 5s tend to seem very certain, especially if they tend to be either a bit arrogant or, worse, very, very, very certain of their positions about certain subjects, their niche subjects, their expert status, and so forth. Every ego identity is a certain ego defense, what I've found, for something that is problematic internally. And this is exaggerated if the person has been going through trauma. I'm probably going to make a video about this at some point. So let's say a 5 that has been going through trauma is going to experience this ego defense, and it's going to display it in the most rigid manner. And so the more unhealthy they are, the more they're going to be really rigid about it, how they are certain, how they know better than everyone else in the field. They know best, whatever it is, no matter how much experience they actually have, right? So this is quite typical of a 5-ish defense in terms of intellectual ability and knowledge and so forth. Now the thing is, 5s usually do have this ability, so it's not like 5s are faking it. They do have this strength, this skill. So why do I say ego defense? Because what I've realized, this is especially the case with 5, and I think Riso and Hudson have mentioned that in their book about where they mentioned 5. 5 has an internal sense of inability. So internally they feel, I'm not saying they are consciously aware of this, by the way, internally there is a certain incompetence. So there's a certain internal incapability. So why do I call it internal? Because this is how the 5 experiences it. So in reality, this internal sense of inability or incompetence is in relation to the outside world. So 5s have a certain weakness when it comes to how they deal with the outside world. So this is also why I think 5s, like core 5s, and probably also people who have a 5 wing in their core type are introverts, because, hear me out, they have a weakness, a natural weakness. They have this weakness when it comes to applying themselves in the external world. So this weakness can be when it comes to force, when it comes to organizing the external world, molding it in some way. So I think it's also, when we go a bit to Jungian aspects, I think it's related to weak extrovert sensing and weak extrovert feeling. These are the core aspects. There's a certain weakness there, or a certain distaste or dislike towards it. Naturally, so the person is born with this naturally, and I think it also overlaps with Jungian, Enneagram Type. They are born with this configuration. So, right, so this is for the core 5. For 5 wings, I see it's usually half of this, or one aspect of this. So with like 6 wing 5, usually they are fine in the physical or sensorial way, but they lack mostly in the emotional way, or in the EQ kind of perspective, which tends to be correlated with FE. And with 4 wing 5, that aspect tends to be fine mostly, but I think it's mostly related to weaker thinking in the sense of extrovert thinking. It depends, of course. I would have to go more into that in another video, but yeah. So there's a certain weakness in the external world for the 5. The 5 realizes and knows, I'm weak at this. I'm weak at applying myself in the external world. So what happens then? The ego defense is created, where the 5 compensates for that by over-intellectualizing, by basically creating a version of the world in their minds. On some level, or unconsciously or instinctually, the 5 knows, I suck at really applying myself in the external world. So if I create this version, image, construct in my mind of the external world, if it's in my mind, I have control over it. And this is where I think 5 and 8 have a certain connection, right? So they say 5 and 8 have a certain integration point. By the way, I also believe that it can also be a disintegration point, but that's another video also. So 5 and 8 have this connection there. 5, their control is in their minds. Okay, so this is where they gain a sense of security by having this construct of the world in their minds and perfecting that. This is the competence aspect that 5 shares with 1 and 3. Also, this is probably a topic for another video or another blog post, but all competence types 1, 5, 3 tend to have a bit of an obsession with perfection. So this is also why I'm probably have to change my title of type 1 as the perfectionist, because 5, 3 and 1 all have a certain, because their competency types have a certain focus on perfecting. And with 5, it's really the perfection, the perfecting of their knowledge, of their take on reality, on the world, because this is where they find security. As a fear type, as a mind type, which is mostly about a certain sense of security, this is crucial for them. This is where they really become rigid if they're unhealthy. Oh my gosh. Wow. Like, it's okay not to know better. Wow. It's okay that I don't know sometimes, that I just don't have the answer for something. Damn. Or that it's okay not to know sometimes, that not to understand, or not to have the answer, or not to have the perfect competency in this kind of construct of reality. It's okay. It's fine. I noticed that, as I said, there is a certain thing with timelines, right? But it's not just timeline, it's also experience. And And I think this is also why they say that 8 can be an integration point of 5. And it's something I also talked about in a previous video, theory versus action. So the problem is with 5 especially, you have this construct of reality in your mind, what you believe the world is like. And it only becomes really valid when it is supplied with experience. If it goes along with experience, only then does it really become a part of your real reality. So in the story with that girl that I was listening to, it was like some kind of podcast. It became a matter of she still hasn't experienced it. She hasn't gone through the whole experience yet. So on one hand, having that kind of knowledge is also just not relevant yet. And this is something many 5s do not get at ever. Like they never realize that certain kinds of knowledge are just not relevant. Because they think they have to create this version of reality in their minds that it's all relevant. But oftentimes it's not really relevant to your life or to your experience. So I noticed, okay, it's actually not relevant to her at this point, or she's currently discovering it. So she was talking, by the way, it was like a podcast between a girl and a therapist, I think, and so she was discovering it in that moment. So I was like, okay, well, she's going through the experience right now, so now the knowledge is going to actually substantiate itself. It's actually going to materialize. It's actually going to be relevant for her. So, and a very simple example for you is you probably know a lot of let's say you know a lot about something, especially if you're a 5 or 5 wing or even 5 fix. There's probably something in your life that you know a lot about, and that gives you a feeling of security that you know it. It's kind of like your treasure. It's like your treasure, and you're gonna defend it with all your life. That's kind of how it feels like. So you probably have that kind of knowledge. I mean, I bet many people have it, even if they don't have a strong 5 connection. Well, what have you actually done with this knowledge? Has it actually changed your life? Has it actually improved your experience of life? Has it actually been relevant? So I've also had knowledge about certain things for a long time, but I just wasn't ready yet to apply it, or I just didn't, the experiences haven't had a crossing point yet where it became relevant, or where it became a catalyst for me to actually use that knowledge, right? So this is what I mean, like you may know a lot about something theoretically, in theory, but you might not be ready yet to apply it in real life, or you might not know how to apply it, or you might just not want to do it, and then it just doesn't become reality, and it kind of is useless. And it's almost like being very smart but also very dumb at the same time, like technically if you never materialize or apply that knowledge, it's kind of like is as if you didn't know it. This is a big realization for type 5, I would say. It was huge for me. So for me, what was huge was to say how to evolve as a 5, to just accept that you will not always know everything, or you will not even know everything, or the most accurate, or the most perfect, or competent, whatever, in a certain field, even if you're an expert in it. So I'm not saying that 5s are false experts. They can be experts in their area, but there's still going to be something you won't know, or you won't really understand. And that's okay. Okay, the last point, very quickly. Type 5 is not an avoidant attachment style. I talked a bit about the avoidant attachment versus type 8 in the previous video. And once again, I have seen that there are very strong overlaps, and many 5s, or many people who have a 5 wing, have an avoidant attachment style, or vice versa. But it's not really the core of type 5. So 5s can be also anxiously attached, they can be securely attached, and they can be anxious or fearful, avoidant, or whatever. So that's not why it's not really a good signifier. And as I also mentioned in the other video, technically every Enneagram type can be every attachment style. So this is why it's not really a core thing. But yeah, so I wanted to point that out. It's not avoidant attachment. So if you are pushing people away, if you are scared of being vulnerable with people or opening up to people, if you do not like being close with people in any kind of way, these are all just signs that you have an avoidant attachment style. It doesn't really mean that you are a 5. So all the stuff I talked about before this is 5, okay? So if you do not really relate to what I just talked about before this, then you are most likely not a 5, not a 5 wing, or not a 5 fix. So yeah, so avoidant attachment style is not cutting it. I'm sorry, but no, it's just not it. Every Enneagram type can have a fear of being close to someone, or not wanting to open up, or even to some extent being disconnected from your emotions can just be a sign of avoidant attachment style, because avoidant attachment is actually based on trauma usually, and you had the experience that you had to cut off your emotions somehow. So I know I said earlier that 5s have a certain issue with the emotional stuff, or EQs to some extent, but still, if they have a secure or anxious attachment, they can have emotions, they can get along with people, they can accept and understand to some extent the emotions of other people. Especially the anxious 5 is going to be quite emotional and like anxious and all that stuff, but still have the traits I mentioned earlier. So yeah, so avoidant, you know, if you relate to what I talked about in terms of avoidant attachment, make sure that you are actually a 5 or an 8 and not just an avoidantly attached individual. So rewatch the video and really look at, okay, how much does this actually hit home to me? And if it doesn't, then you are not really a 5 or 5 wing. I also have other links. I have a 5 versus 4 blog article. I have a viptypology.wordpress.com website where I have many typings on there. So this is also where you can see, okay, does 5 apply to me or not? All right, so that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video, and please like, share, subscribe, all the good stuff, and yeah, have a good day and bye.